Welcome to Cultural Maintenance and Climate Change. We have an exciting program today. We're looking at, I think, the two scales that we really need to be thinking about relative to this topic, which is the macro scale, in terms of planning and issues of intangible heritage, and also then at the micro scale, which is really focusing on materials, durability, and preservation technology. So I'm going to Queen Quet and Dan Rizza will be our third set of presenters. They're going to be talking about a cultural heritage model for coastal community sustainability. Queen Quet is head of state for the Gullah Geechee Nation, and Dan manages the program for sea level rise at Climate Central, which is a nonprofit organization that communicates climate change science, effects, and solutions to the public and decision makers.
Get away, Chile, Jordan. Get away, oh, Chile, Jordan. Get away, Chile, Jordan. I want to cross over the sea, my Lord. I want to cross over the sea, my Lord. I want to cross over the sea, my Lord. Down here, in the evening, how do you see it in the cracky teeth soup? I said to me, well, Daddy, I need your showing thing. But no. Already dead time. What is you gonna get me to say this? I say, I can't. Rian did it. Oh, son did it. Yona. Sarah Donna. Got it right to be dope. And she I study this job. So I'm going on you. Yeah. The Elizabeth said, water to bring me. What do I take we back? We haven't know. Say, what do I want? Coming for me. I can't be doing it. Yeah, man, like the hundreds of people. The Tifui, Gullah, Cali, Ishala, Jacksonville, North Carolina, Jacksonville, Florida. Oh, Panisha, Seattle, and anything like that. Yeah, man, actually, talk. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? I'm sure anything like that. Get them England in short line. Cast them off here. He has studied hard. Who then do? And what then do? How they do? Tell the seaweed on the shore. Back of yonder. Then try for change up everything. And we said, I ain't what I'm supposed to do, y'all. Going for trouble, that water, y'all. I'm gonna throw that in. And that's it. That ain't no nothing. Talk. Say, well, ain't no nothing. He said, oh, we want to be there. Since the 15, 16, 1700. Oh, we the cracky one? Okay, then going on. So then when that started thing come, then they did all put these dummy box on, I call it TV. That was thing to fall in the water. Then they did for them now. See, I'm supposed to rain in no storm. Thing to fall in the water. He said, Now, we've been cracking on. We ain't been to know nothing tall in it. He said, We said, oh, yes. But when we told you not to build there, we were the fools, right? We didn't know anything because we didn't sound like you. We didn't look like you, so we didn't dress like you did, so that meant that we had no knowledge of the shore that we've been on since the 15, 16, 17, 1800s. That we didn't know the sea islands. The place that we carved out as what others call a cultural landscape. But just because when we were thrown down like this, y'all take us as we cracky. They said, well, we just thought that since you didn't work in our field, but we worked in these fields, that are all of this land. And we made it clear to you that what you're attempting to build is not sustainable where you're placing it. That's why before you got here, you noticed we didn't build there. There was a method to our madness. Well, no, we got your memo. We heard that you said in your planners meeting that we were the emotional natives. So there was no reason to listen to us. You said that we're scientists. We don't have time to talk to these people about their culture. They have to understand that over time, things change. Yeah, and as much as things change, they remain the same. That someone else said that you could put something somewhere, and then once you put it there and it fell over, you wanted everybody's help because you wouldn't listen the first time. Yeah, we grew up with that, and they used to tell us a hard head make us solve something else. But now you want us to come save that something else for you. And you say, well, you do want to talk to us now? Why? Is it maybe because your technology just didn't resemble ours, but now you realize that there's still math and there's still science in a cast net just as much as there is math and there is science in the engineering of a building, there is math and there is science in the engineering of a bridge, or the reason why we lack them because we knew if you put it where you're trying to put it, there would be a sinkhole. But once again, as Native people who then went to institutions of higher learning, and we started to realize that our ancestors weren't just singing, as we say, dry, long, so. They weren't just positioned where they were positioned. They didn't just have their houses where they placed them for no reason. They thought about what they were doing, and they didn't think just for themselves. They thought about the collective. They thought about the future generations. They didn't just think about today with no thought for tomorrow. But everything is about how people layer it, isn't it? Isn't it about how they kind of drape things the way they want them to look for that period of time, and then somebody else comes along and says, well, I don't like it draped like that. I want to change it. But when you change it, did you find out the reason the person might have draped it that way to begin with? Did you ever find out what was the logic and the reasoning? Oh, that's right. If you didn't think that a person was a human being to begin with because you thought they were 3/5 of one, you wouldn't think they had logic to begin with because you're not thinking that they're thinking. So herein lies the problem. For Native Gullah Geechees for multiple generations, up to this very moment that we are in, people have always went and devised plans for us without dialoguing with us about the plans we already had for ourselves. And so therefore now they come and they say, well, somehow, even to their exclusion, they've managed to remain where they are. And now the rest of us somehow aren't able to remain where we are in these new buildings that are affected and infected by the various things that you just watched for about the past 30 to 40 minutes. And so then they say, well, how did they stay? And everybody else seemed to move in and then pack it up and move out. And so then they come and they say, well, we'd like to talk to you about your TK. I don't have no churn in your name, TK. Who there is? Someone want to crack it deep with that? No, traditional knowledge. How can we utilize it within the context of what we're planning? How can we utilize it in the context of what we're engineering? How can we utilize it within the context of what we fight to preserve? And then we say, well, when we do preserves, those are things placed in a jar with a lid on it real tight, no air getting there. You set it on the shelf, look very pretty for a good little while, but when you are ready, you can devour it. And when you finish devouring it, your system expels it. Then it's no longer there. So that's what you want to do, is preserve things? I'd rather continue doing what I was doing instead of doing that. Because it only means that for that moment that you thought it should look a certain way, will it look that way? And when you don't think it should, then you can just take it down and just start over and engineer something else. Not thinking about the hundreds of years that I've been inextricably tied to this location, not thinking about the place that is based on my cultural community and the fact that my cultural community is based in and on it, literally living in the ocean, on islands. So here you come with new terminology talking about the sea level rise, and we said, and what else is new? Sea level rises in a couple times a day. So what are they talking about? So once again, we were back at the beginning where I should have been a crack my teeth like this, and think like that, because it does sound like they can't get their thing today, can't get anything like that. We don't understand each other at all. So even with the new terminology, spoken in a language that we're both supposed to be communicating in, we don't sound alike. We don't hear the same thing. It doesn't mean the same thing. So how can we work together on something if you don't know what I'm saying and I don't know what you're saying? So it puts us in a very precarious position, even more than the sea levels that are rising, the oceans that are acidifying all around us, while we still deal with hurricane damage from years back. And we deal with mold infestation and sea island buildings, even if you do nothing more than just live. Here it is. What do we do in these circumstances and in these communities when we live here and we have to sustain it, and we have sustained it and we've adapted accordingly, and we have been the embodiment of this word we found out they use across the bridge called resilience. But they don't listen to us, even though we can speak their language now. They still don't respect and appreciate why we do what we do, and why we'd rather remain layered somewhere on the porch sipping some sweet tea than to come across the bridges and come into the city, where even if we're there and even if we're speaking, people act as if they don't hear us. They look out at something, and where we see beautiful trees, the maritime forests, and we say, look at God. They look at it and say it's undeveloped. So then they bring in bulldozers, which to us is destruction. And we call it destructionment, and they call it development. And yet then, once they place it in a place that we say it's not going to stay standing there, so you shouldn't put it there in the first place, and it starts to fall apart, then they want to bring in more people to study. What's wrong? Because the emotional natives couldn't have had it right. So we decided, well, why talk to those people? Talk to people who want to talk to. Work with those who want to work with you. And we formed our own Gullah Geechee Sustainability Think Tank. And then we decided that since in our world things are circular, so we already recognize that whatever energy we put out eventually comes back to us. And many times it gains momentum on its way back. So we recognize ahead of doing something how it will affect and infect the collective whole of that circle. In the Western world, no, it's linear. But they somehow forget for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction along the same line. They forget that part. So they said, well, all of them ain't gonna come talk to us, and even if they do, they'll act like we're speaking Gullah to them at all times, and that they can't understand even when we're speaking English. So we'll write it, because in the Western world, that's what they respect. They don't respect the oral tradition. They don't respect engaging with one another. So we put together We Be Gullah Geechee, cultural capital and collaboration anthology, giving people guidelines for research in our community and showing the models we have used by doing interdisciplinary work over time in our environment for the things that we value, that we want to have for the next generation to have, that we want our culture to continue in the midst of, in spite of the changes to the climate and how they might be veiled and covered certain ways at times, but they're having impacts on all of us, whether we want to believe it or not. And I know some don't believe until different folks do the talking. So it's been interesting, because on my journey here from the Sea Islands, I expected to be able to engage with you for a full hour, to be able to actually show you the tools we've used so that you could use those tools in your work where you are. I did not know I was going to be reduced to 1/10 of that time. So you'll have to follow me at GullahGeecheeNation.com and come to something else. Or find me at QueenQuet.com and come to something else. So that you'll actually get the workshop that you see online that we intended to do to really show you how to use the model that we created through the Gullah Geechee Sustainability Think Tank. But because you're not going to be able to take that journey that we wanted to take you through, Dan, Rizza, and I, for that hour so we could interact and we could be in a circle together and truly show you how our community works. I didn't want to short you on not at least taking you on a journey back home with me. So Mark, go ahead, let's take them on a little journey so that the folks here can see some of what I see, some of what the Gullah Geechee Sustainability Think Tank sees, and so that they can have an opportunity to recognize why it was important to us to talk to people who say they have technology that they use to preserve things. In the Gullah Geechee Nation, we see the things people have built destroyed with one hurricane. We see the tides get rising with sea level rise, and people say, well, why is it important? Because as it accelerates, it's our community, it's our culture at risk. It's our art that is within these institutions, within the places where our spirits yet live, places that have been here for over 150 years, that are built on water. Because as I said, we believe the water to bring me, the water going to take me back. These places are not just rich to us because they're edifices, it is because they build up our spirits. So those places of the past, as well as those we built for the future, in which we educate our children, and those places we restore, that we want to bring to life the stories of, are the things that we are working to preserve in terms of the historic preservation, while continuing the culture that can tell you about it. Even as you walk along the shorelines of the various sea islands and feel the energy and power of our ancestors and all that they left here, all that they carved out in this cultural landscape, we want people to be able to feel the same power, the nurturing, the energy that we get as we go into the water every time and things like that together for know who we are. When we do these ritual and things like that, where we did at Skeeter Beach, American Beach, Atlantic Beach, all these places that now our cultural heritage network that we just launched over in Scotland and where we're headed to the United Nations allows us to join with others of the world to march along our shore, take our shore elsewhere in the world with us, for the world to look at it together and see that maybe the knowledge you need to do the work you want is right there, but maybe it's spoken in another voice. Take the time, pause, listen, and maybe you'll do one of the greatest things in the world that the proverb says: get understanding. Peace and blessings.
Thank you, Queen Quet.
You're welcome.
It's an honor to be here with you and Kwame, and thanks to Nancy and APT. It's good to be in front of new audiences and to interact with new audiences. So my name is Dan Rizzo. I work at Climate Central. Let's see, how do I move the slides? Oh, here we go. We are a nonprofit research group, and please take, I can provide the slides afterwards, or please feel free to take pictures of them, but I'm going to be running through a lot of slides quickly, so I'm just going to give you a range of the sea level rise information that we've been providing to Queen Quet and other material. And many of you don't know, but Queen Quet is a computer scientist as well, so she's given us a lot of great input along the way as we develop our new tools. So we're based in Princeton, we're nonpartisan, non-advocacy. We have a team of scientists who do peer-reviewed research, and we build public tools and materials and visualizations on top of those and other research that's out there. And we localize it. So in a lot of our tools, you can search for your zip code or your location. Some of them are global, some of them are based in the US. We also have, we do journalism, and we have a group called Climate Matters that develops materials for the meteorologists across the country. This is one of the flyover videos that we did in late 2015, and let's see if it plays. Okay. And so what this is showing you is the long-term consequences of our emissions in the coming decades. So if I were to put a pile of ice on this table at room temperature, we all know that all the ice would melt. We just don't know exactly when. But in these videos, we're showing you how much the seas will rise after we reach 4 degrees Celsius. And then we compare that to the levels that would rise if we were to able to curb our emissions and keep warming to 2 degrees Celsius. And so we've done these for a number of locations around the world. You're allowed to, you can access them on our website. We have a bunch of them there. I'm going to keep moving quickly here. This is a word cloud that shows you the kinds of activities people do with our materials. So when people come to our site, they can download map images, PowerPoint slides, other things, and we give them the option to tell us who they are, where they work, how they intend to use our materials. So this is just giving you a snapshot of what they've typed in over the years. So these are actually just the .gov emails. So a lot of them are using for planning, research, presentations. We've kept in touch with the 4 County Compact down here. There's a lot of great work going on here in Southern Florida. You're ahead of a lot of the rest of the country. Here's a slide showing our public tools. So feel free to take a picture of it or come up to me later. But this is where you can access what I'm going to be showing you. And I developed these for Queen Quet recently. This is showing you Wilmington, North Carolina, the same kind of long-term sea level rise that could occur based on the emissions we emit this century, right? So we're locking ourselves into these levels at 4C versus 1.5C, so you can see the contrast, right? What we do in the coming decades will impact us for the coming centuries. Here's Charleston after 4 degrees versus 1.5 degrees. Beaufort, South Carolina. Beaufort, South Carolina. Now, North Carolina is Beaufort?
Beaufort.
Beaufort.
Yeah. I was just hoping I would get that one right.
That is the other thing.
Savannah, Georgia. I'm from New Jersey, by the way.
No excuses.
Savannah, Georgia after 4C versus 2C. Jekyll Island, 4C, 2C. And in some cases, you can see a contrast between 2C and 1.5C. And so on our website, we have our peer-reviewed research with all of the associated statistics, like the number of people currently living on land that could be impacted here. Jacksonville, Florida, 4C, 2C, 1.5C. Jacksonville, North Carolina. So this is we worked with a photorealistic artist, Nikolai Lamb, and he developed these kinds of images for iconic locations around the world. This is, you'll see where this is in a second, but this is 4C, 2C, right? It's Wall Street. This is Google's headquarters, 4C, 2C. So this actually got us, there were tens of millions of views globally. The international media picked this up. It was a very powerful way to communicate the idea of what we do in the coming decades will impact us for the long term. This is some new technology we're developing that will collect photorealistic street view type images as well as LiDAR data, elevation data, in order to animate what flooding could look like at a particular home. And so we're looking for interested towns and cities to work with and do some pilots to further develop this technology. It could be used in a number of ways. This is our public tool, riskfinder.org, and at the risk of losing your attention, you can use it on your phone. You can search for your zip code or town or city and find localized information. So here I just typed in Florida, and you can see all the different area types that we have analysis for. So we have counties, postal codes, congressional districts, other kinds of legislative districts. These are each page, so there are thousands of pages, right, for the whole country. It's a US-based tool, a tool for the US. You can access all kinds of information. I'll show you some of it. So here we're looking at total population below 4 feet in Florida by county. So this could be 4 feet from long-term sea level rise or 4 feet from a flood next week. We start at the local high tide line and we go up 4 feet. It's a screen level tool, right? We're using the bathtub model. You can get a sense of which counties have the most people at risk. I should also note that the tool does not take into account some of the recent defenses that have been developed. I had a great meeting with the city of Miami, of Miami Beach yesterday. I'll share with you some of what I learned. So here we're looking at Miami-Dade County by zip code. Same kind of thing. And you can download fact sheets and all kinds of things from the website. Hazardous waste sites. And let's see, actually I'm going to go back. At this table, oh, you know what? Keep moving. We have a standard map, shows you what is potentially inundated at different water levels. So you can get there from the other tool. Oh, here's the table. So we basically intersected NOAA's LiDAR data with as many federal and other kinds of data sets that we could. So we have census data in here. A lot of EPA data is in here. Buildings, right? So we haven't yet analyzed historic preservation type facilities. Some of them are in here, but we could potentially do a lot more with this. And so as you move the water slider, you can see how many more people are at risk at 1 foot versus 2 feet in all the state of Florida, or for a zip code, or for a congressional district or a county. Recently, we did an analysis using this kinds of this approach for the Space Coast, looking at the launch pads in Florida, and we were able to quantify, an estimated number of floods by year for each point that you're seeing here. So this is kind of a portfolio analysis we're able to do now for large entities that have lots of locations. I'm moving quickly here. We got a lot of media recently. You might have seen this in the news because we launched a global tool. It's an international conference. So we developed a new global elevation data set that improves upon the legacy data set that was developed by NASA using satellites to assess land elevation. And what we found was, on average, the data set was biased about 2 meters too high, which meant that we thought the land was higher than we thought. So on our map, you can toggle between the legacy data versus our new data set, showing the potential that the land is potentially inundated using this. So you can see this is Brazil, Rio de Janeiro, the original data set versus the one we just developed using machine learning. So you can go to our tool, it's called at coastal.climatecenter.org, search for your global location, and we have this kind of analysis. be a report. Breaks it down by county and city. Lots of statistics in there for. If you're interested in the data set, you can get that on at our website. And wanted to touch on a study we did with IDB, late 2017. We used this coastal dam data set that improves upon, it gets the NASA SRTM data closer to LiDAR level quality. And that's in our tool as well. So we actually have Risk Finder for Caribbean island states and lots of Caribbean locations. You can search for those and they're available. /Caribbean, riskfinder.org/Caribbean. In that tool, you can see the multi-year risk of flooding at different water levels. So what's the risk of a half a meter flood by the year 2060 or within the year 2060, using different sea level rise projections to see how sea level rise is actually impacting coastal flooding in the near term, right? In some cases, doubling or tripling it. And then you can look at the projected sea level rise plus annual flood or a mild flood or a 10-year flood and see what those levels look like based on different projections. So you can plug in NOAA's projections. We have COP 14 and 17, the probabilistic models, Army Corps, other models you can plug in. And we've done some photorealistic images for Jamaica and other locations. And as you can see, other kinds of analyses. We're looking at the total population that is currently living on land below 1 meter in the Bahamas by district. We have wireless access points and land. So this slide I borrowed from Susie Toriente, who's the Chief Resilience Officer at the City of Miami Beach. It shows you how they're thinking about this in Florida for this city. You can see the different projections, and then you can also see their plans and their studies. And so what I wanted to show you is that they've actually raised, I learned yesterday how much they've accomplished, and they've raised the roads in a lot of locations across the city, and they can prove that they've avoided flooding. So it's a great example, kind of a laboratory of what is already happening here in Southern Florida, resiliency efforts that are actually working. Here's another example, before and after. And here you can see kind of the different levels of different events. And I wanted to mention for those in the audience who are interested, feel free to come and talk to me, but we're going to be doing studies in the coming year on affordable housing, how sea level rise will impact affordable housing, wetlands, migration, and biodiversity species. And I'll leave it there. Feel free to reach out to me with questions or requests.
Other questions?
Hi, my name is Andra from Jamaica. My comments are really for Queen Quet. I'm very encouraged by what you had to say because in the Caribbean now we're trying to bring more focus to what our traditional communities have to say about the process and how to involve them in adaptation planning. So what you had to say is very relevant for us, and it's something that we hope to learn from your experiences. So I plan to make contact with you and to see how we can share more information across.
That was a comment.
Any other questions?
Nancy, yeah, Queen Quet. I'm just wondering where we can buy your book.
You can buy it from me. That one that was in my hands is the last one. I haven't been on the tour, so I've been just about sold out of them, but you can also find them at Gullah-Geechee. This one's not on. At Gullah-Geechee.biz. So GULLAH Geechee is how you spell Gullah Geechee.biz. There is no I in Geechee, if it a we, all right? So GullahGeechee.biz is where you can get them, and that way the funds go directly back into the work that we're doing. If you find it on Amazon, then of course Amazon's getting the money, not the Gullah Geechee Sea Island Coalition to continue this work. So thanks for asking. But definitely that's the last one, so if you want to buy it, you can.
Other questions?
Right here.
So thank you, great presentations, and we should all travel up to see you.
Just don't stay, visit.
Yes. Don't worry.
All right.
The worst thing is someone that comes to stay. I
Move
know.
furniture around.
But this is a question for Larissa. Since this is APT and you talked about windows, we have to push back a little bit. So if it sort of contradicts the data that we've seen if you take into account embodied energy, so that is the missing link in your little decision tree, because it also has a reasonable heritage value in addition to the embodied energy, that the avoided impacts of the creation of those windows. So your decision, was this a house that has a lot of windows?
Well, it's a historic house, so it doesn't have a very high window-to-wall ratio. It has about 24 windows total. And the retrofit that I recommended for the windows, I was going through pretty quickly because it's only 10 minutes, but it's a rehabilitation of the existing double pane windows and adding a storm window on the interior.
Oh,
Yes. So
Okay.
that's how you would achieve
that's a
the
different story.
5% energy savings.
Yeah, okay.
And the future work for my research is also conducting a cost analysis, uncertainty analysis, and carbon analysis. So, and the decision framework that I presented is quite malleable, I would say. So you could use it to balance any of the project objectives that you have, including carbon. So you just
Sure.
change a few things in it.
No, it was a great,
Yeah.
great decision tree. And I would just also call everybody's attention to the Pilkington quarter inch vacuum glass, where you need to do reglazing. I wouldn't do it willy-nilly, but that's a new product that we're seeing now. So for that application. But anyway, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Was there one more question? And did you want to come up to the mic? Maybe that might make this a little easier. Thank you.
My name is John Wood with the North Carolina State Preservation Office, and this question is for Queen Ket. We deal with a lot of areas in eastern North Carolina that have disadvantaged and minority populations. And do you have any success stories as to how we can bring those audiences into dialogues with preservation professionals and local governments? Because there seems to be a disconnect that either they're intimidated to come speak to people, or like the experience you had, the professionals don't seem to engage the way we'd like to see.
I believe it's more of the latter than the former. I don't believe anything has to do with intimidation whatsoever. I think it has to do with miscommunication, as one person used the word. I hate the use of that word in the Western world, because most times that's not what it is. It's you didn't do what you were told. And then you don't want to admit it, so you say, oh, there was miscommunication. No. Okay, amongst us, most of the population you're referring to, most of them are Gullah Geechee that are along the North Carolina shore. I just left the North Carolina Coastal Conference to come to this conference this week, so I spoke there and here. And the biggest thing that we found is that the professionals truly don't value what the indigenous populations are saying. They don't value what the communities are saying. And I say that because when there's literal money and funding for something, whether that's through a grant or a budget, they are not counted in as their knowledge being valuable enough to pay them to be present. And what ends up happening is the people who are salaried hold meetings, usually 9 to 5. Well, where do you think those people need to be? At work also. So even if it's your job and you're hosting the meeting, yeah, you're getting paid from 9 to 5, but that person can't take off from their job to now come and provide maybe the input that you're looking for. And it doesn't mean that they feel intimidated, it means they have a life, okay? And that is not valued. And so a lot of times what we point out is you need to restructure the way in which you do things. And part of that is learn that community's culture down to even when is the best time to have a meeting with them. Where is the best location? Because if you say come to a federal building and they got to go through search and seizure to get in the building, why bother? If you say, well, we'll have it in your community at the community center where you come to anyway, then you probably have a high turnout. Are you feeding people or aren't you feeding them at the meeting? Do you have child care? Do they have stipends to pay for child care if they're working mothers? These are all considerations that get left out. It's not just you that asked this question. It's every environmental organization I have ever encountered in my life phrases it very similarly to how you did it. And they wonder, why can't they get our community to talk to them? Well, your community hasn't really talked to us. You probably sat in a meeting with others in your office and talked about us and how to get to us. But you didn't come and ask us, because when you do, if nobody else shows up, Queen Quet will show up. And be there to speak on behalf of the people and say, okay, this is what they said, y'all on their last nerve, because y'all keep having these meetings at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on Wednesday. Okay? So they want you to move the meeting, have it on a Saturday at noon, and have some food, and they'll be there. You know, sometimes it's that basic, and then you get to start interacting. Another thing is start to switch gears. Don't always think that it needs to be at a conference, because everybody can't afford to register for conferences like this, okay? And it's not worth their while necessarily, okay? But if you see a community event, an annual community festival, an annual community engagement session, you might want to go ask the organizers, would it be all right if we come there with some materials, some information, or even a sign-up sheet to come to a meeting, or look at something for us online, or fill out a survey and send it back. And people might engage that way, but you need to have a community liaison. Somebody who is native to that group or set of people, or that the people trust themselves, that can bring you in and introduce you. So that's always a big one. And so you can't do that if you just show up with your friends from the APT again. Okay, because people are like, what apartment? Okay, what apartment? So definitely, those are some things that you can always do. Just shift the way that you think about it. Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? We'll end it there then. I just want to thank all of the speakers again, and thank you.